I was just asking David about the podcast and what would the questions be? Like if I said to you, I'm pretty darn sure the Bible is BS and doesn't count for much. And then what would someone say? What would they want to know to qualify that hypothesis? Would you say, well, how do you know that? And I would say, well, I did the research. Then what would someone say? Well, what did you research? Well, first, I started researching the historians responsible for telling us what we know. And I researched the background and character of the historians who give the accounts on which we depend. And then, so what else would you want to know? Where did you get your information? Primarily old books, all kinds of places really, but primarily old books and putting one and one together. And it's all there, particularly in like Loeb's classics and some of the, like the Peloponnesian War, Victor Hansen, what's his name? David Victor Hansen, I think. Anyway, that he wrote or played a role in, that gave a great timeline that kind of revealed the truth about Aristotle and things like that. And then you begin to find out some of the customs, and we've always known that Egypt didn't line up. There were just some big mysteries that didn't make sense, and everybody was just okay with it. But I'm not. And then we knew that there were all kinds of ancient artifacts here that are just ignored by our literature and people. And there are places that are hidden. And on and on and on. And so that was a part of it. And then I ran into, in my research, the first guy I ran into that was helpful was Randall Carlson, and I took a class on sacred geometry from him. And man, that blew my mind when I started seeing the relevance of numbers and how numbers make up this world. Not math, because math doesn't always equate, most of the time, but not always. There's so many things that I thought the scientists knew, but they don't. Lots of stuff. And so sacred geometry, it taught me that everything is perfectly put together. I mean perfectly. Now, you would expect that from a creator, of course. But, I mean, the numbers are wild. So after that, I ran into a man named Doug Vogt, and I started reading his work, and that pulled it all together. Of course, that was a couple years ago, and I'm still studying his work. But basically, what he figured out was that Piso, Calpurnius Piso, wrote the New Testament, and he had aliases. So the basic thing that Doug did for me was turn me on to the codes that are necessary for understanding the Torah, because the numbers are what's significant in there. Every number is just wildly important in many ways. And there were a number of discoveries that Doug made. For instance, the measurement of the sacred cubit. It's so important. And he figured that out, and that kind of connects everything. But primarily figuring out that Calpurnius Piso he and his family wrote the New Testament. And the aliases early on, I think one of my first discoveries was that Josephus was fake. And that was an easy tell. I don't understand for the life of me why anybody else hasn't looked and said the same. I don't get it, because for me, once I read about Josephus, it was blatant deception. I mean, blatant, really. And then one thing led to another, and you see the little schemes that are going on. Now, looking back, I can just imagine what fun they had with it all. And today, I uncovered an article that pointed to actually the Greek, one of the older Greek translations actually had Piso in, we know of Mark, definitely Mark. And, probably he was copying the Stoic ideas of Seneca in Mark. But Doug even did the, like the pomp and circumstance, the tempo of the writing says something. And so he was great to pull all that out and figured the New Testament out. Revelation, I think, was written by somebody else, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But the Torah, the first books, were primarily code. I know that my Jewish friends say that they study them and use them. That makes absolutely no sense to me. Abraham lied. He cheated. They did everything. Look at Jacob. Look at Joseph. And that was one of the key things, Joseph. Key things for me. I love Joseph. That was my favorite. The coat of many colors, who doesn't love that, right? I mean, talk about marketing. There's no better job of marketing than the good old Biblio. So Joseph looks like, to me, this is what I've concluded, that he went over there, he interpreted the dream. He was a sly old guy, interpreted Pharaoh's dream, thanks to the butler, and was made a regent, or, in charge of all the 7 years of great plenty and the 7 years of famine. And then it looks like he took the wealth, because there was so much they quit counting it, and took it for himself. And that guy, he may have been married to Hatshepsut, the female queen or Pharaoh that even made a beard. And but anyway, the whole Joseph story is so convoluted. And when you start figuring out the details and the truth of it, it's wild stuff. Today, I did find an article saying that this particular researcher says that he's pretty darn sure that David and Solomon aren't real. What we know in the history books or in what we've got doesn't reconcile, and I've got all that at home. So how do you explain to somebody that this book that the world acknowledges as the Word of God, that it's fake? So what questions do you ask? What do you need to know? There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. And the biggest thing that it does for me is makes me realize that we are in a simulation. It can't be any different. And the more I think about it, aren't these the cutest things? And the settles with me, I'm fine with it. What's different? You know, what is different about being in a simulation as opposed to being an unworthy child of God, right? Your whole life is molded for you. Well, I understand that most scientists of all types, I think for the most part, believe that there's not free will. And I'm not so sure about that. The way I look at it is that, yes, I think we're programs, each of us, and I think that's why astrology works, is because perhaps the program was based on the planets. Everything else was in the sun. And so that makes absolute sense because I've always found truth in astrology. So, in the basics of it, and numerology is absolutely crazy true. And if you just take a minute to try it, you'll find out. So, where was I? Lost my train of thought. Okay, so the things that physicists have been unable to explain, which I thought they knew all about, like mass and gravity and water, all those things make sense when it's an information system. And it just makes absolute sense. We do know, or at least the best I can figure, is that the civilization prior to us, look at this wild fungus. These are crazy. I took some of those blueberries home to eat, but I didn't do it because I need to look them up. Then I'll know for sure. Simulation. Oh, so the only thing it says to me, the simulation, is that we can't change anybody. We can't. And that it's so important to know ourselves, because we can't change who we are. We might as well get to know it. Get to know who we are. Figure out, what we're good at. And invest it like, get out. Claim it. And it also gives us such power to understand the energy within us. Whoa, that blows my mind. The one problem I had with coming to grips that the Bible and Jesus were fake was that I'd had so many spiritual experiences over the years, and I couldn't part with that. And I couldn't quite figure it out. How to reconcile all that with truth that I found, because it has to reconcile. And so I figured it out. The minute I dealt with truth, I embraced it, my spirit just got stronger. No, I haven't been in peace like I used to be because I'm not yet settled. And no, I'm not founded yet on what I believe, but that's in process. The one thing I do know is what is not real. And that's a huge help. And when you come to realize that lie, you begin to see what happens around us every day. And it begins to make sense that history is not real. It's been written by the people who need for you to trust a narrative. And the narrative is BS. He goes back there.
He chased the critter. I saw the critter run across the road and he chased him, so who the fuck knows it?
He'll come.
I'm done walking.
Okay. Anyway, I guess I'm about done. David's walking the dog so I can walk and talk, because I do a lot better if I'm walking than if I try and sit down and give information out. I have a slew of information, and if anybody has a question, oh man, please ask me. I'm like a dog with a bone when I have a question, and I'll find the answer. Everything that I've said today, I can back up. There's some great parts of this. Is it a loss? Oh my God. My reluctance to do this podcast, I've blamed on technology. But in truth, it's my reluctance because my entire life I've shared good news. And that's what I thought I was created for. And I feel like I'm taking people's fairy tale away. And if I didn't know for sure that it was manipulation, I couldn't do it at all. And the other part of this is that it's quite easy to see the manipulation, and the purpose of it all has to do with our climate and science and earth ages and the truth of history. And the Torah and the Mayans and so many great civilizations tried to leave us messages that we're coming to the end of an earth age. And I am glad to have that knowledge and wisdom. It's not an easy thing to embrace, but it helps me to prioritize my values while making me sad in some ways and reminding me that I've been given courage. However much courage I need, I have it for facing the world that I'm in. And it's a beautiful world, and it's full of grace and full of adventure, beauty, intrigue. It's amazing, and I love it so very much. I think truth is absolutely the highest value we can ever go after. And you know what? It costs everything. Finding truth has cost me so many friends. Some that got mad at me, and some that I tried to make mad at me because I knew they couldn't handle the truth that I had. I love those little stars. And so I'm down 1,500 friends because I was ugly about what I found out, because it upset me. And I wanted to blame someone. I wanted to be mad. I wanted to think that there was some evil man or some evil guy behind the curtain that was to blame, like the Wizard of Oz, that I could just go there and get everything straightened out and figure out why, just why. But there is no man behind the curtain. It's you and me. That's who's here. And we've been given brilliant tools, supernatural ability, energy, light, everything we need to figure this place out. and to take care of it in ways that'll help it to be sustainable for every human. This is not what I thought my life would end up like at all. I thought I would be giving motivational, beautiful Jesus talks all over the world. If anything, this isn't that. But truth is good. Sometimes it just takes us a while to get used to it. It definitely will set us free if we're brave enough to handle it. And maybe that's why it's so hard to get. I've paid for the truth with almost 5 years of my life nonstop, and I'm glad to have it. And I'm here to share it because what else is there to do? I've made a big investment, and there has to be a return, because that's a principle that works. In spite of us, here they come. So, till next time, over and out.